Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Frame by Frame podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about design ethics, not just about ethical designs such as color schemes that could be that are neutral or focus groups, all that kind of stuff. It's also going to be talking about ethics, as in, should you work for a company that may have a history of, let's say, animal testing or discrimination, or perhaps their marketing methods are a bit dubious, i.e., perhaps that they're not so ethical in releasing a product, or they somehow beat their competition in an unfair way, perhaps maybe even buying a smaller company to uh, com- to absorb it and then change things. These are the sorts of things we're going to be talking about regarding ethics. And I think ethics in design is something that a lot of us know. I think it's a safe bet to say that we would always strive to design products, brainstorm and do research that is ethical. In other words, when it comes to research, we wouldn't discriminate. We would only go for our focus groups. But I think it's an element that is very rarely brought up. Most of the time, when we think of UX and UI design, we talk about things such as techniques in Figma, components. We talk about user research methodologies, but I don't think we ever really look into ethics. Now, it could be that it's just something that is just so baseline, so fundamentally natural for a lot of people that it doesn't need to come up. But then I think that it's always good to be reminded of why we make the decisions that we do in design, why we research the way we do, why we pick the focus groups. Of course, if you're creating a product, ethics is not about incorporating an audience or a target market that isn't actually a target market. For example, if I'm designing an app that is specific to German speakers, of course, I'm not going to be getting research from people who don't speak German. And that's not unethical. That's not discrimination. That is just simply that the research would not amount to anything beneficial for creating a good app. However, if it comes to the ethics, if I said, yep, I want to do research with German speakers, then it would have to be anyone who speaks German. I couldn't say, oh, it has to be someone who is actually German, or someone who is European, or someone who is from the Middle East. So these are the differences with the ethics, because it could be very easy to say, hey, everyone needs to be all into this, and this touches on the realms of inclusivity, something we will actually be talking about in a future episode, because inclusivity is important, but it's also important to remember that it's not always feasible to design an app that is for everyone. You have to target a specific market, or create a specific niche. Anyway, first of all, I think we really want to look at a general thing, as in design ethics in UX and UI design. So I think the first question I would like to ask my co-hosts is, how would you feel if let's say you're working on a project, and it's a project to do with the environment. Maybe it's to do with planting trees, planting flowers. Maybe perhaps it's cleaning up refuse. If you were working for a company and you're in a team, and on the surface, it's an app that is designed to promote being environmentally friendly, but you realize that some of the user research methodologies, for example, are not quite ethical. For example, you might ask leading questions. You might ask someone, well, why have you not previously considered doing good for the environment? Is this something that would be seen as unethical, because you're forcing someone to have an opinion, whereas really you should be neutral and just getting research into their habits. What do you guys think to that question or something similar?
I mean, you're not forcing their opinion, but you're putting the idea there, like you're planting that seed or leading them to that solution, which,
Yeah, or
I
leading
mean,
them. Yeah.
ethically, you're cheating yourself, because if you're going to do that with your research, then you're not going to get the information that's actually going to make your product succeed. So I think that's, yeah, I mean, ethically, you
Yeah,
should be
well,
asking open questions to get open responses so that the person is free to decide what they want. At the same time,
yeah,
it's you're
I think it's important to not be biased. In other words, to add a bias there, it's got
yeah.
to be free, and which is another part of ethics is allowing the person you're interviewing or doing research with, and to speaking freely.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's just bad research at that point though if you're asking closed questions, or not closed, but
Yeah,
leading. You're basically giving them like, what kind of messaging system would you want in an app? Okay, well, how do I know I want a messaging system? What's your product? What's going on? Like you're getting them to give you specifics about something maybe they wouldn't have if you just ask them questions about their favorite app or specific to the product you are designing. But yeah, ethically, yeah, it's on them. I mean, that's part of this ethics discussion, though. Is like there is dark design. Go to the dark side. Help Amazon make billions by designing systems that don't help the user. They actually make it more confusing to cancel an account, and
mm,
they fixed it since. So I can't be too hard.
yeah.
Like they
It's sort
fixed
of
the problem, but it was there and they knew it existed and it was on purpose. Like they were signing people up automatically for subscriptions, and most people, yes, it's your fault for not reading, but at the same time, you're trusting an app to put you on the correct selection
Yeah, it's sort
first.
of like the forced updates with Microsoft. I always hated them because it was like, well, I don't want to be forced to have to update. It should be a choice. If I get a virus or something, that's on me, but I don't need someone to babysit me. That's
Exactly.
an
And
ethics of design.
I know it comes down to the designer, honestly. Like, I don't, I, the company may want that and they may be asking you for that, or they're guiding you in that direction, or maybe it was your choice as the designer. And in that point, like that is unethical practice. Um,
Definitely.
I mean, but even if it wasn't your design, it wasn't your decision, but they asked you, like, hey, how can we make it a little more difficult? Well, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. And what you're actually practicing is going to be harmful for some people. Like maybe they're
Yeah,
ordering something
exactly.
that's €9 one time, but they don't realize they have a subscription, and maybe that's not in their budget. It was just something outside of what they normally spend, and there you go. You're hit with $9 every month until you realize what's going on, and then you have the struggle of
Yeah.
canceling stuff. Like Amazon buries that stuff in their menus. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Especially when it comes to a free trial of Prime. I remember I had it once. This was quite a while ago. And I'm not exactly someone who's a rookie with internet websites, not at all. But I had to even do a bit of Google research on where exactly I could find the way to cancel the Prime subscription. Well, no, the trial, I should say, to be more correct. And it honestly, it was one of the most arduous experiences I've ever had on a website trying to cancel this and a couple of other things, which is why I don't. I remember years ago with the free trials, you didn't have to enter your payment card details. You could just sign up and then you'd be prompted if you wish to continue, you need to enter your details. But obviously, it's all done now where you have to enter your card details, which I think is unethical
they're hoping you
because,
forget. That's
yeah,
just
they're
it.
hoping.
They're hoping you forget. Like
Yeah, yeah,
7 days is over. Now you're hit with that first month. Now you got to cancel it. Hopefully you'll forget in that next 30 days.
yeah. I understand it, but I don't find it ethical. I find it very unethical because you're relying on people, especially this day and age where people pay very little attention now. You're relying on people, like you said, to forget about it or to think. or to think, oh, it's such a complicated process, I can't be bothered, or it's only €4 a month or €15 a month. But actually, especially in this time where everyone is struggling financially, €4 a month, something as meager as that, it mounts up. Every euro counts now.
Yeah,
But
and
I
I
think when it
mean,
comes
here's
to,
sorry,
to,
keep
to
going.
no, I was just going to finish off by saying that I think when it comes to this kind of design, it's not just the principle of it; it's also making it easy for a user to cancel, making it obvious instead of making it really complicated and obscure. Because it's relying on someone being lazy, in other words,
Yeah,
or being confused.
I think
But
ethics.
actually,
I think ethics can
but
fall back on our personal branding. Like there is no set rules. Ethics lie on a person, on a corporation, on an entity, or
mm,
yeah. And so it's like, as designers, we have an obligation to our users. But again, if
definitely,
you're gonna make your obligation to the dollar first for your company, that's gonna actually hurt you as a designer because it goes to your brand. Like people will associate you. Like look at Amazon; they got in trouble, and now their designers, they might not be targeted as far as like companies hiring, but now you have that mark on you where somebody might recognize, like, all right, so that's why you're not there.
yeah.
Um,
I think it's there is sort of an unwritten oath. You know that Hippocratic oath that doctors pledge and swear to do. Doctors, nurses, and so on. I think there's sort of something like that for UX designers. I mean, when I was doing, well, even back when I was doing web and graphics design, I always made sure to put the user first. I would give my input, my advice, but I would never force it upon someone. I would never say, "Hey, you have to do it like this," and I would never say that you can't do this, you can't do that. I'd always put the user first because I think in the long term, if you've got a good product, it will sell itself. And that's where ethics come into play because even if you design a really good product, you've got fancy animations, you've got people who are experts at Figma. I think if you don't have the ethics nailed down or established, you may as well just not have a product because people won't use it. I know personally, there are certain products I won't use. I mean, even an advert I get come up on YouTube. I think, oh, I don't remember that company, but if it ever comes up, I'll boycott it because you're interrupting my experience. I know that's a bit of a slightly off tangent example, but I think it underpins the point I'm trying to make, which is you should always put the user first. And I think when it comes to working for a company, of course, profits are important, but I don't think that they're important enough that it's the number one thing. You have to really care about your users and you also have to care about your staff as well. I think ethics also applies to the designers, not just the consumer, the user, the customer, but the staff as well. I mean, would I want to work for a company that treats its employees differently, not based on the roles they have, and by differently I mean as in more responsibilities, but as in someone's personal characteristic? I mean, I would not agree with someone if I'm working in a team. I would not agree with someone being ostracized for whatever reason.
no, I think
What?
that goes to like the product or company themselves too. As a designer, like if you're working for that company and that's being asked of you, that looks bad for your company, obviously, and you don't want to maybe work for somebody
Obviously,
like that. However, it also, like, as a designer, should fall on you to look at some things and go, this looks bad for a company that maybe you like working there, maybe you like your colleagues, like protect their jobs, because it depends on how hard the hammer falls on ethics, like what happens to a
mm,
company. Like if they really mess up, it could ruin somebody, especially reputation wise. Like you can ruin a company's
yeah.
reputation and they'll go down. They don't have to be fined, taxed, or sued. Like you can boycott places. That's how that works. And
Well, people do. Users have boycotted whenever, especially when it's something's been in the media. When you hear of a company has been doing something on the side that they shouldn't be, you get people who will boycott. I mean, that's why the media is really powerful.
yeah,
Like you
it
said
even
with
goes
this
into
Amazon thing.
it even transfers into AI right now. Like look at what happened with ChatGPT, like open source. dude.
Oh yeah,
You let go of
yeah,
the head. So like a zombie, it'll die. And what happened? They didn't reverse whatever decision they made for why ever. Nobody still really knows. Now you have all your lead developers for one of the most popular products saying, well, we're going to walk too. Well, now your product's
yeah,
shot. Like, yeah, you could find people to replace them, but if they're the people doing everything, then yeah, you just let go all your leads. Good luck. Like,
yeah. It's sort of a UX UI designers SAG or AFTRA strike,
yeah, exactly. And
if there was one closest.
I think really like if there's a big enough design team at a big company that's doing some shady stuff, it's on you guys as a design team. Like you all should have similar ethical code that you follow. You're on a team together. Everybody knows, hey, we all have a job. We're all paid well. I know they want us to do this, but this might be a point where we got to draw the line.
Yeah. And I think this is also why it's important to, even if you're a senior UX designer, you guys will be able to confirm this. I think a senior UX designer, I don't know about now, but I know I read one salary some years ago or even last year where you can earn a six figure sums. And of course, let's take away the medical expenses because America's medical system is way expensive. But if we take that, I also think that if it is important to save because you may need it where you could end up in a quandary where you know from insider knowledge or outside that your company you're working for, the project you've worked on is unethical in some way. But then if you've not got any savings, I think you become trapped in a quandary of, well, I could walk, but then how do I feed my family or pay my bills? But on the other hand, you you say to yourself, not sure I can carry on working here because it goes against my principles and ethics. That's why sometimes it's not always black and white. I don't
It
think.
is not always black and white. Like even as the designer, there's been times where I question things, and usually I'll double check. Like there's a recent situation where I was like, can we say that? Like, does that work? Is that allowed? And I just double checked, and then I got roughly common responses, except for a couple. And then I was like, okay, so my decision is we can't say that because I can't say a whole lot about it, but I don't want to say that something is there that's not there. Like in anything, I'm not going to design graphics, or like even in advertising, I'm not going to do the graphics for a poster that promises something that doesn't exist in that product. Like you can't promise people things that aren't real. Like that's not good business.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
unethical. Um, I don't know. I think Will, didn't you say you were reading the Lean Startup book
Yeah,
or
that sounds really
something?
right.
Have you read Hooked?
No, not yet. I haven't heard of that one actually.
Okay, it's by the same author. It's about designing habit forming products and how to basically click people's brains so that they will keep repeating the same procedures. Now, this can go two ways. It can go, you're designing a product, for example, Duolingo. It sends you reminders. It tries to get you hooked. It gets you in a gamification mode where it is kind of a dopamine drip that gets you learning. But it can also go the other way, such as like gambling or apps that get you to spend. There's lots of games that do that. I mean, look at what was that, Clash of Clans, man. People are like, oh, I just need a couple diamonds. Oh, I just need a couple more gems. Oh, I just need
Yeah,
this. And then
yeah,
at the end of a month, they don't realize, but you just sank $250 in an app, man. Like that's crazy.
yeah.
And they're
That's how they do it. Just sorry, Zach. Sorry to interrupt, but just to come on to that point, there are plenty of games that do that where they make sure you're short by a few gems or whatever currency it is in game, and you think, okay, but it does build up. I did it some years ago on a Final Fantasy game, and I thought, oh, I spent a couple of hundred here.
yeah, and ethically, like gamification is good. People designing games for profit is a little shady in my opinion, because I am a gamer. I love games. Me and Will, before we started our episode, we're talking about Magic. It's not a video game, but it's Magic, and I spent money on Magic. Will spends money on Magic. It's like, it's part of games. It's part of anything. You play guitar, you're going to buy strings. Like, that stuff happens. But there's the designing it to be that way. Like, okay, you're short 5 gems. 5 gems only cost $199. Yeah, all right. It's
but you do that 10,
but you don't
10
think
or 20
about
times.
it. And then they have to come into account, like, it's a game, it's exciting, something's going on. This is with any product. As long as you're getting some kind of response in your brain in the form of a dopamine hit or something exciting, a reward, now you're going to
reward,
now you're going to have some kind of hook on somebody. And it's a control thing, and a responsible designer or company that designs this way will do it responsibly and ethically. And the ones that don't end up, stealing somebody's life savings over a video game, and they realize at the end of the month they screwed themselves because they were ADHD and were getting a huge dopamine hit for 8 hours while they were stuck scrolling on their phone and whatever.
I used to call it pounds for pixels, because essentially it's nothing tangible. I mean, you mentioned the thing about a guitar, not to go off at a tangent, but there's a difference between paying for something that, first of all, yes, you enjoy, but it's just wear and tear. I mean, I'm lucky on my bass guitars that I haven't needed to change the strings, especially not on my fretless. But if I needed to, that's something I'm getting that's tangible. It's something I need for it to function. Whereas these games, it's usually something you don't actually need to play the game. Now, it's something that's going to make the game more interesting, but you don't. It's needs versus wants, in my view. But then we get to ethics, and we can see from this example, and the examples I mentioned before, and what you brought up with Amazon, Zach, is ethics doesn't just affect the immediate people or company or users. It has far-reaching effects. It does have a ripple effect, which is why it is important to have good ethics, because when something does go wrong, that is not, especially when it's not human error, it's easier to mitigate, in my view, at least.
You can mitigate it. The best thing as a designer is, like, if you wield the power of design and somebody's using a digital product, which science shows it's already kind of addicting, you can choose color to make your app icon stand out. It goes back to color psychology. When people are using your app, you can use a color to make them feel relaxed, like they want to stay in this app. It depends on what your app is, what your marketing, and what your company's goal is. But it lies on you as the designer to pick these things out and be like, okay, this is getting borderline like addictive as far as like the habit forming process that we're using. And if they are profiting, let's say, from a game, now as a designer, it's your decision to be like, okay, I can't let that happen. Like, they're going to be prompted way less, and even shopping apps, like, change the color so that it's comfortable, but don't make it enough where they stay forever and just keep buying, and don't make it a reward to hit the buy button. Like, it's exciting already. People get a little dopamine hit when they hit the buy button. It doesn't matter who you are, but don't focus that as an interaction. Like, you should be very careful how you focus that as an interaction, because which Bitcoin trader did that for a while? Was that Robinhood or something? They had like confetti when you would buy.
I think it was,
when you would buy coins,
it was Robinhood.
Like a confetti interaction that happened, and they actually ended up getting in a lot of trouble for that, because it's kind of addicting. It's gambling. It's stocks, quote unquote. So that already has like the gambling aspect. Well, now you're adding the celebratory aspect to it, where they're being rewarded for doing that, and that makes them feel good. And now you have a habit. Now when they're down, they're going to hit that because they need that. When they're having a bad day, or they're pissed, or they're up late at night.
Yeah, they need that hit.
Yeah, and it just slowly builds and builds and builds. And that was super unethical for a trader to do of any kind. So
Well, that process is exactly the same when it comes to drugs. Someone gets having a down day, they try a drug or they get recommended, they buy it, they feel better. It's a reward thing. They remember it. I think when it comes to this kind of stuff, not drugs because it's not the topic of conversation here, but I think when it comes to this stuff, it's always important. I remember I've advised people when it comes to games, especially younger people in the past, make sure you distinguish between what you need to play a game against what you want. And then you look at, well, if there's an item I want and I can get it later on in the game and I don't have to pay for it, go with that. But it's not always as clear cut as that. And I've done it. We've all done it where we get a reward. We feel, oh, right, this is great. This will give me the edge over other people. And then it eventually does become an addiction.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
again, this is where design ethics comes into play.
you have TikTok, you have Facebook, you have all these social media moguls that,
I'm glad I have none of them.
yeah,
I'm glad I have none of
but
them.
we have all these companies that they found out it's working, whatever the trend of gamification, or the reels is the killer. That's the killer right now, is reels, like TikTok reels. That, I mean, look what it's done for attention span, from like 23 seconds down to 2. What the hell is happening to our brain? And it's just scrolling. It's mindless scrolling and reel watching, and then I don't know. It's but they dumped so much research into, like, what gets people to stay. What is it that gets them hooked? And we need that because we're going to be the next number one, and it's working. So
Yeah, actually, Zach, you told me that you've written some stuff on this. What are the kind of ethics have you written on? Because I know you said you've done a bit of publishing on this, online, and you've had discussions. What other things have you had from that?
from writing about it, I mean, ethics is it's such a vast area for yourself. Like, you're making your own rule book for how you're going to function. That's also the problem with ethics, is there is a time where they cross the line and you can get in trouble, or your company can get in trouble, or fines may be
Yeah.
issued. There comes that point where you do cross that line, but within the space between good design, like the white design, and dark design, it's a weird gray area that people just kind of walk in between. Like, okay, for this product it's okay, for this product it's not. But then you have the designers that pay me my 6 salaries and I'll do whatever you want. And it's really important that we stress, I think, to new designers, that I know you want the job, but don't do everything they tell you to do. And anything you see that kind of throws a flag, mark it and ask, and do what you can to protect your own integrity at that point. Like I said, I've come across some things even in graphic design, and specifically there's a couple marketing things where I had read through them as I was doing them, like, it's not that what you're doing as a company is unethical, it's what you're saying right now as far as like how you're selling yourself, because it's pretty untrue. Like, it's not that it's not in your plan, but it's currently not who you are as a company. So don't, like, you can't change your image just by saying you do something. And I think a lot of companies do that, and then you as the designer, like, you're a part of that. You're helping them, you're facilitating them in putting out these ads, or putting out these app designs, or putting out content for them. And it's really important that as a new designer, you sit down and you figure out your 10 commandments, if you will. Like, you figure out your list. These are my rules that I will not break. These are the companies I will not work for because they do not meet my list. They broke one rule on that list. You can guarantee that they'll, what do they say? They take the finger, they take the hand. So you got to be really careful. And when you notice something, let's say you didn't notice and it comes up later, you have to raise awareness to it, and you have to find out, because maybe it's your time to, jump ship. Like, if it doesn't fit your standards and ethics, you shouldn't be there, because there will come a point, I think, in a lot of designers' careers where they love a company they're for, something changes or something happens and they don't say anything and they just kind of roll along, and then something else happens and it might be bigger the next time, and then you're pushing your own rules at that point. And the more you check off, the less you're going to have. And the less you have, the more they'll keep pushing at the rest of them. I mean, where is your line on that list? Your line should be at the bottom of the list where you underscore all the things you've put in your ethics list.
Exactly. And maybe everyone has heard this before, but like taking a bunch of micro steps back and just refusing to really stick up for your ethics while in your position will eventually lead to you being a mile behind where you wish your work was or where your company was. And so that's why it's important to stick up for yourself on what you need to do in your work right away and then sooner rather than later. Of course, that's hard to do though.
I think that makes choosing a company hard too, like if you are looking for a job, because I think sometimes people forget you're applying there, but it's almost like your application to talk to them and interview them as well. I think a lot of people, maybe it's just me that thinks that, but I think a lot of people take an interview as, oh my God, I'm getting grilled. I'm here. They're going to ask me questions. And it's like, yeah, they're going to ask you questions, but it's your time to grill that company. You're not there yet. You didn't sign anything. There's nothing attached to it. And yeah, you might want the job, but if you don't find out the information you need, you might end up with a job that kills all your dreams about what job you wanted later.
Yeah. Well, again, that's sort of slightly loosely ties to what I was saying earlier. If someone's in a position where they need a job or they have to have the career, but there's some unethical practices going on. How do you make the decision to leave and possibly end up financially destitute, or stay and question your principles and integrity as a designer?
Will, were you a Boy Scout?
Yep, I am an Eagle Scout. I'm looking at my Eagle Scout ring on my desk right now.
There you go. That's exactly it. You have to be a Boy Scout. And the day you decide you're not a Boy Scout and don't help that old lady across the street is the day you lose that merit badge, I guess. But yeah, like you have to put in a lot of work to get where you want to be in a career, I think. And even getting your foot in the door is a ton of work. And so if you have an ethics list, be prepared to be challenged on which ones you're going to chisel off of that list. And if you're not prepared to take any, then you have to be prepared to take the chance that you have to leave somewhere. And that's going to be super hard. But I'm wondering which one is harder. Is it harder to chisel those off your list and 10 years down the road when you have your promotion and whatever, and then your company gets in trouble and maybe you're out, or you have a,
Well,
yeah, there's things that can happen, and you have to
well,
prepare
what about
yourself.
what about if we go back to this thing we talked about regarding games? I mean, what if you're a designer? Yeah, you're a designer, you've entered a company, you've got a lot of ambitions, and you know that you probably need a lot more money to fulfill them, achieve them, than what you would be earning, even if it's pretty good. And then you get the promotion, and then eventually you succumb to greed, or you succumb to power. I mean, it's one of those expressions. One of the prisoners who gets turned into one of the guards. I'm sure that has happened in to designers, where they get a little bit of a promotion or some power, and they realize that it's more important for them to fulfill their own personal ambitions than to look at the wider aspects or the broader picture in terms of ethics regarding colleagues, users, all that kind of stuff. Do we think that can and does happen? Do we think
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
there's a sort of corruption of ethics?
Absolutely. And I think that's where we come back to that word integrity, where it's like, I
Yeah.
I love designing. I love all types of creativity, and I am fortunate enough to have a job that I really enjoy at a company I really enjoy, and I'm good at what I do there. It's a good fit. And I think about this all the time. That's why I mentioned, like, if you see something, say something to somebody in your company. Try to figure out what's going on. Don't just jump to conclusions and be like, "Well, I quit because this is what I think is happening." Um,
Yeah, there could be a legitimate reason behind it.
exactly, and sometimes it, like I said, in the few times I've come across it with graphic design, it's like sometimes it's as simple as a misunderstanding, or there was a whatever mistake. Even if it's just an excuse, you basically are calling somebody out on it, and they either fix it or they go, no, that's what's supposed to be there. Yeah, it's up to you again as a designer. Like, you have to have that integrity to be like, where is the line on this list? And let's say, yeah, you make your own ethics list and your own, you know, here's where my integrity lies for how I design things and who I'm helping and how I'm helping them and what I will and won't do. You make that list and you think later, that one's not so important. That one's not so important. Okay, well, let's say you get halfway through your list. Is that enough? What if your next promotion lies on you just chiseling away one more and then one more and then, like, then it's, again, you've crossed over to that side and you have broken your own ethics, and so therefore you're no longer credible. And that's maybe where you either stay in that position for the greed, or you tape those ethics to your wall and keep them in a frame by your desk the rest of your career. And every time you have to make those decisions, you stare at that list, because again, I enjoy what I do. I enjoy who I do it for. I can't see myself ever wanting to do something else as much. And it's a passion thing. Like, I would hate to risk what I have in my career because I really enjoy everything about my current situation. Doesn't mean it won't change. It doesn't mean my list will never get tested at my company, but it does mean I'm prepared for the day that happens, because that's when I do have a list of my ethics in a folder here. And it's like, I will happily pull that out that day because I think about that all the time. It's not something I have to look at, but every time I'm asked, like, oh, can we gamify that immediately pops in my head, where it's like, okay, how should I go about this? Should I even try it? Should I tell them no? Should I, if there's anything that comes up, I'm always thinking about that anyway. Like, it doesn't look good for me as a designer if my users can't trust me, because they're not going to stay.
Well, there we go. That comes down to integrity. I've always thought. Well, if we look when it comes to ethics, I've always thought, and I've seen this especially with certain manufacturers of bass guitars or instruments in general. Generally, smaller companies or those who are starting out, or startups as we call them, I think the quality is always there, because a smaller company or a company that's a startup has to establish a good reputation. They have to market themselves. They have to sell themselves through their reputation, their word. Their guarantee is their word, which is their reputation. I mean, Fender, I could never own a Fender, because I think compared to 40, 50 years ago, the quality is just not there. They're just manufactured so much that a big company in general, I'm not obviously saying that, Fender is unethical or big companies are unethical, but I think there's a slight ethical thing where the quality goes down, because a big company is in a position where it knows customers will buy for lower quality but the same price, which is why for me, I would love to work in for a small startup, even if it meant that I wouldn't earn as much. That wouldn't really matter, because like a lot of people out there, like my colleagues, I'm very passionate about UX design, UI. I love it. I can get lost in concepts for hours. But I would always prefer to be in a position where I'm working towards doing the best for the intended users, for the customers, making sure that they don't get ripped off, they don't get things forced upon them, or where they're encouraged to do something. It's a case of fulfill the user need, but don't give them what they don't need, if that makes sense.
Yeah, give them what they need. Just don't abuse that. Like, don't take advantage of their need and then
Yeah.
Later, they won't need you at all because they need a lawyer or a divorce lawyer because they spent all the money. Just
Or they lost their house in World of Warcraft or something.
that'd be the worst bet ever.
I heard that years ago that people they got so addicted that they lost the mortgage on their house or something, or they had to sell up, or they sold their cars just to fund it.
Yeah, that's how easy it is to get people, though. Like, gambling addiction is huge. I mean, addiction in general, and especially in an economy like this, it might not make sense, but people spend more money on liquor when the economy's down. I don't know if you guys knew that. Bar sales go through the roof.
Yeah, I'd heard that, right?
And it's because people are unhappy. They're unhappy at where they work. They're not making enough money. They can barely get by. It's like one bad thing after another. And even if you're not an alcoholic, it just sounds good to go for a drink and forget, doesn't it? And then that's how it starts.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah, I've done that enough in my life, even to the point where I thought it was, you know, when you see these films or TV series where the main character is going through a rough patch, not necessarily through his or her own doing, but where they go to a bar and there's some sports channel or some classic song, and they have a whiskey or a cognac at the bar. You know, like in America, you guys have dive bars. You know, where you go to a place like that, there's some sports channel on or some music, and you just sit there drinking a double, and you just want to forget.
yeah. And so it's really easy to take advantage of that, especially if you're designing
Yeah,
products to fulfill a need that either is there or maybe it's, I mean, social media wasn't exactly a need, but it became one, especially like who knew COVID was coming, but during COVID, like social media, online, TikTok exploded. Like that's all people did. Everything went remote. I'm glad work is staying relatively remote because it's actually a lot healthier, I think. Like if I had to be in, it's the only time, especially with my company, I'm really happy they approve. But it's the only type of job where I can get up in the morning, get a run in, come home, shower, take my kids to kindergarten, and then come home and punch in. Like I come home, I do my meetings, I do what I have to. If something comes up, I'm at home and I can pick up my kids or I can get to where I need to go. And if my hours aren't there, guess what? I have till midnight or so and I can punch the clock again if I have to. Like it's, to me, that's not a big deal because I get my breaks. I get the space my brain needs sometimes when I'm thinking about a lot of complex solutions to really complex problems. And even in personal life, problems come up and things happen. And when you're stuck in an office all day, you cannot, like, my sister was in that situation. She was like lucky to leave the office and walk for a half hour. And I'm like, yeah, I couldn't do that anymore. Like I need that time where, all right, I've been in front of Figma for 4.5 hours and now I'm going for a 25-minute walk. I'm going to eat my lunch and then I'll go back to my desk. And if I'm short on hours at 5 o'clock when I want to punch out, then I know at 7 o'clock tonight, I'll punch in, do what I needed to do. And the rest of the night, I'm either going to bed or I'm going to finish whatever I wanted to do.
yeah. Well, I mean, Will, did you have anything to add? Because obviously we could talk about this all night, but I think when it comes to design, I think we've covered all of the relevant aspects and a couple of scenarios that people may consider. But do you have any closing thoughts or comments, Will, on
Yeah,
anything we've mentioned or anything you want to bring up?
absolutely. So it's interesting that we bring up gamification. I mean, of course, gamification is going to pop up in a conversation about design ethics, but there is like the aspect of the human psychology that if you put certain things in front of a person, it could push towards an addiction, like gambling style stuff. However, gamification can also be used for like crazy good, because like my startup that I'm working at, it's one of the features is a job tracker. So instead of using Microsoft Excel or any of the other websites, you could use this one. But the main difference is that we use gamification features to try to help people with motivation. So whenever people apply to a certain number of jobs each week, we literally award them points. There's nothing really you can do with the points at this time, at least at the time of recording. But we're working on what to give people to do with those points. And so just giving people some extra little rewards for doing proper steps to take along the job search, like it helps us help people who are lacking the motivation to go apply to X number of jobs or reach out to X number of people on LinkedIn. So like gamification itself can be a slippery slope, but I think that really depends where you're applying it, like what the product is already. Like
Exactly.
if it's just getting skins in Overwatch or Fortnite, like, and you have loot boxes, like, yeah, you could definitely get people to spend more money on it that way. So luckily
Yeah.
that's just money, and
Well,
it's not like their time and like their health. But then gambling halls, that's legit money and time, so that's pretty rough.
yeah.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Like any design technique somebody's using, if it's to keep users engaged with an app or a product or whatever they're using, any of that is going to go that way. Gamification is just one of the best ways to do it. But it's not that the gamification part of that is bad. It's how it's being used. And so,
And whether it's monetized.
exactly, and like with
Because-
the app Will is helping design and develop, it's I would say that's the best possible use case for gamification, because you're trying to better somebody's life with that use. You're not trying to better your company's life by them purchasing something.
Yeah. When it comes to gamification, just to finalize, not finalize, just to add my thoughts on it, just to round it up before we conclude the recording. I remember in one of my companies, we had this gamification scheme where if we met our sales targets, or we managed to close sales, we would get points, and we could redeem those points for physical, tangible objects. And it was in increments. Sorry, no, there weren't any set increments, but it was sort of 50 points, 100, 500, 1,000, 3,000. And of course, the more points you got, the better the prize you could redeem those points for. And I remember redeeming a couple of things. I think one was this stress ball pineapple, but I think I gave it away to a colleague or something. And then there was another thing that was a keychain or something. But I think the top prize was where you get a free meal paid for by the company, like not an actual restaurant, but they would pay for a meal, but it wasn't just for the one person. It was sort of seen as a collective thing. So you'd get pizza coming, being delivered, or something like that. But I really think that ethics is something that even if it's something instinctual for them and natural, I think it's always good to bring them up, because I think it can really help to keep a design user focused, or user centered, I should say, is the correct term that we use. But all of you out there who are listening, we really hope that again, like every episode, that it's been very useful for you. Perhaps it gets you thinking about your next design and how you can possibly make it better for people, maybe even think of better ways to engage with people, to engage with your audience, to engage with your users. And I think for companies as well, people who work for companies that listen to this, I think it's also good for them, because they get to realize that, hey, you know what, we have a good reputation, and we've got that not just through our really good designs and accurate research that have contributed to those said good designs, but because we've got ethics, and we put the user first, and we put our employees first. And I think that a lot of people out there would happily take slightly less of a salary, even if it's just a bit below the average, if they feel that they can work in an environment where their principles and ethics match the company culture. But overall, I think this has been a very good discussion about ethics. I think we've brought up some really good points and some scenarios, and of course, gamification, which is a common theme in a lot of things. So that might also be a way for you if you're a designer or you're a company and you're thinking of implementing gamification for users. It doesn't have to be monetized. I think it's actually best not to monetize it. But if you want to gamificate, you award points, and then they can redeem users depending on the app can redeem them the points for things. Or maybe you can even give freebies. Maybe you can say, hey, if a user gets 100 points, we will give you a sticker. You know, there are so many possibilities. But we're going to wrap up now. So thank you all again, as always, for listening. If you're just joining us, please check out our other episodes because they are equally as informative and insightful. We will be back next week. The topic is TBD, to be determined, but we will probably have another edition of a special guest episode in a week or 2 weeks. So please stay tuned for that. I will be posting the updates. And if you're not doing so already, please follow us on our LinkedIn page, which is the Frame by Frame podcast. We're going from strength to strength. We're getting more and more users each week, and we would love to have even more so that we can help and reach other people. And we've had that. We've had people message us individually, collectively, where they're saying that our motivational posts, our discussions, it is really helping them, particularly those talented colleagues of ours who are unemployed. But for now, we're going to sign off. So it's good night from us, and we hope you all have a productive week, whatever you may be doing. So see you guys, or hear you guys, or rather talk to you guys on the next episode. Thank you, and good night.